Have you ever met someone in a dream before you ever met them in real life? Claire Bennett woke with those words echoing through her mind, her heart racing as dawn filtered through the curtains of her apartment overlooking downtown Portland. She reached instinctively for the notebook resting on her bedside table, opening it to a page already crowded with sketches of the same unfamiliar woman she had been drawing for nearly 6 months. Every morning began the same way. Every dream ended the same way. A quiet riverside, a gentle smile, the scent of blooming cherry trees drifting through the air. And just before everything faded, the mysterious woman would softly whisper the exact same sentence. "Find me before you forget." Claire carefully wrote the words once again beneath the latest sketch, noticing that her handwriting had become steadier than it had been weeks before. She no longer questioned whether the dreams would return. She only wondered why they felt more like memories than imagination. As an architect, Claire trusted structure, measurements, and practical explanations. Dreams belonged to another world, one that she rarely discussed with anyone. Yet these dreams refused to disappear. Instead, they became richer with every passing night. She could describe the worn wooden benches beside the river, the sound of distant church bells, the small independent bookstore with blue-painted windows, and even the warm expression on the stranger's face. Everything felt astonishingly real. The only thing she could never remember after waking was the woman's name. Claire prepared breakfast almost automatically while replaying fragments of the dream inside her thoughts. The woman had laughed as sunlight reflected across the water. She had pointed toward a bridge covered with flowering trees before turning back, with eyes filled with quiet understanding. There had been no fear, no urgency, only an overwhelming feeling that somehow their lives were already connected. Before leaving for work, Claire slipped the notebook into her bag, something she had started doing without fully understanding why. Her coworkers often described her as calm, organized, and impossible to surprise. But lately, even small moments reminded her of the dreams. A stranger wearing the same shade of olive green. A melody that sounded strangely familiar. The reflection of afternoon light across office windows. Every coincidence seemed to pull invisible threads toward someone she had never truly met. That afternoon, while reviewing blueprints with her team, Claire found herself distracted by an illustration hanging inside the conference room. It showed a peaceful riverside lined with flowering trees. Her pulse quickened. The scene looked remarkably similar to the place she visited every night while asleep. She stared for several seconds before quietly looking away, embarrassed by the intensity of her reaction. After work, instead of driving directly home, she wandered through the city without any destination. She stopped beside the waterfront just as the sun began to set, watching golden reflections shimmer across the river. The evening breeze carried the scent of spring blossoms, and for one brief moment, she felt as though she had stepped inside the dream itself. Claire closed her eyes, breathing slowly, hoping to remember something she had overlooked. When she opened them again, the feeling had vanished, leaving only the quiet river and the fading light. She smiled to herself despite the unanswered questions. Somewhere between reason and hope, she sensed that her story had already begun, even if she still had no idea where it would lead. Claire expected another ordinary night, yet the dream returned with astonishing clarity. This time she stood on the familiar riverside path beneath rows of flowering cherry trees as soft evening light reflected across perfectly still water. The mysterious woman appeared once again, dressed in the same olive jacket Claire had drawn countless times inside her notebook. She smiled with quiet warmth, as though greeting someone she had known for years rather than a stranger meeting her only in sleep. They walked together without speaking, passing a small bookstore with faded blue window frames, a family-owned cafe filled with gentle laughter, and an old stone bridge stretching gracefully across the river. Every detail felt so vivid that Claire could almost feel the cool spring breeze against her face. When they reached the center of the bridge, the woman paused and looked toward the distant skyline before softly saying, "You are getting closer." Before Claire could ask what those words meant, the woman reached into her coat pocket and handed her a folded piece of paper. Claire unfolded it slowly, expecting to find a name or an address, but the page contained only a simple sketch of a lighthouse standing beside the ocean beneath a bright morning sky. As she tried to understand its meaning, the dream dissolved with the familiar whisper carried by the wind. "Find me before you forget." Claire opened her eyes moments before sunrise, her heartbeat steady yet filled with curiosity instead of fear. She immediately reached for her notebook and carefully recreated every new detail she could remember, including the lighthouse that had never appeared before. While making coffee, she searched online for coastal towns with historic lighthouses that resembled the drawing, but dozens of possibilities appeared, offering no obvious answer. Throughout the day, unexpected coincidences continued following her. During lunch, a coworker casually mentioned planning a weekend trip to a charming riverside town famous for its independent bookstore and annual spring art festival. Later that afternoon, Claire noticed a framed travel calendar hanging outside a local cafe. The featured photograph showed a peaceful stone bridge lined with blooming cherry trees that looked remarkably similar to the one from her dream. She stopped walking and stared at the image long enough for passing pedestrians to glance curiously in her direction. Rational explanations still existed, she reminded herself. Beautiful places often shared similar features. Yet deep inside, another part of her quietly wondered whether the dreams were leading her somewhere real. That evening, instead of returning directly to her apartment, Claire visited the public library, hoping to clear her thoughts. As she browsed travel books, an elderly librarian noticed the sketchbook tucked beneath her arm and asked whether she enjoyed drawing landscapes. Claire smiled politely and admitted that she mostly sketched places she could not explain. The librarian responded with unexpected kindness, saying that sometimes people discovered meaningful destinations long before they understood why they were important. Those simple words lingered with Claire as she walked home beneath the fading colors of another spring sunset. Standing by her apartment window later that night, she looked once more at the latest drawing inside her notebook. The mysterious woman still had no name, the lighthouse remained a puzzle, and every answer seemed just beyond reach. Yet for the first time, Claire no longer felt like she was chasing an impossible mystery. She felt as though invisible pieces of a much larger story were quietly beginning to find one another. The following Saturday arrived with clear skies and a gentle spring breeze that seemed almost identical to the one Claire remembered from her dreams. After several restless nights, she accepted the invitation her coworker had casually mentioned and drove 2 hours to a small riverside town hosting its annual spring art festival. The moment she parked her car near the historic downtown district, an unexpected feeling settled over her. The brick sidewalks, flowering cherry trees, old-fashioned street lamps, and rows of locally owned shops felt astonishingly familiar, as though she had walked those streets many times before despite knowing she had never visited the town. Claire slowly made her way through the festival, passing painters displaying colorful landscapes, musicians performing beneath blooming trees, and families enjoying the warm afternoon together. Every few steps another detail matched the places she had carefully sketched inside her notebook. A bookstore with faded blue window frames stood exactly where she remembered. A small cafe overlooked the river from the opposite corner. Even the gentle sound of distant church bells echoed through the streets at almost the same moment she expected to hear them. Her heartbeat grew faster, yet she reminded herself that coincidence could still explain everything. She entered the bookstore, hoping the quiet atmosphere might calm her thoughts. Inside, sunlight filtered through tall windows onto polished wooden floors lined with shelves filled from floor to ceiling. As Claire browsed through travel books and local history collections, she noticed a framed photograph hanging near the register. It showed the same old stone bridge from her dreams during springtime, surrounded by flowering trees reflected across calm water. She stood silently studying the image until the owner smiled and mentioned that the bridge had become the town's most photographed landmark for generations. Claire thanked him before stepping back outside, feeling as though invisible threads continued pulling her towards something she still could not understand. Following the riverside path, she eventually reached the bridge itself. Everything looked exactly as it had appeared night after night inside her dreams. The weathered stone, the wooden benches nearby, the graceful curve of the river, and even the gentle breeze carried the same peaceful atmosphere she had experienced while asleep. Claire rested one hand lightly against the cool stone railing, trying to convince herself that the strange familiarity would fade once she accepted the place was simply beautiful rather than magical. Then she heard quiet laughter behind her. Instinctively, she turned around. Standing only a few yards away was the woman from every dream she had ever recorded. She wore the same olive jacket, carried a camera over one shoulder, and paused beneath blooming cherry blossoms while speaking warmly with an elderly couple. For several seconds, the world around Claire seemed to disappear. The sounds of the festival faded into silence as disbelief replaced every rational explanation she had carefully constructed during the past 6 months. The woman looked up briefly, her eyes meeting Claire's across the bridge. Instead of surprise, her expression carried a gentle curiosity, as though she had noticed a stranger admiring the scenery. She smiled politely before returning her attention to the couple beside her. Claire remained frozen where she stood, unable to speak or even move forward. The face she had seen countless times while sleeping now existed beneath. The afternoon sun, entirely real, entirely ordinary, and completely unaware that someone standing only a short distance away had spent months searching for her without ever knowing her name. Claire remained standing on the old stone bridge long after the woman disappeared into the cheerful crowd gathered for the spring festival. Her heartbeat slowly returned to normal, but the certainty inside her only grew stronger. She had not imagined the face that had visited her dreams for months. The woman was real. She breathed the same fresh spring air, smiled at strangers with effortless kindness, and walked the same streets that Claire had unknowingly memorized while asleep. After several minutes, Claire quietly followed the riverside path, careful not to appear intrusive. The woman stopped frequently to photograph musicians performing beneath blooming cherry trees, families sharing homemade desserts, children releasing colorful paper boats into the calm river, and elderly couples enjoying peaceful conversations on weathered wooden benches. Everything about her suggested patience rather than urgency. She seemed less interested in perfect photographs than in preserving genuine moments that might otherwise disappear forever. Claire found herself smiling without realizing it. There was something deeply comforting about watching someone move through the world with such quiet appreciation. Eventually, the woman entered the familiar bookstore with blue-painted window frames. Claire hesitated outside before gathering enough courage to follow. Inside, the peaceful scent of old books and freshly brewed coffee filled the air. The owner greeted the woman warmly by name. "Good afternoon, Emma. Your latest photographs have been attracting visitors all week." Claire's attention immediately focused on that single word.
Emma.
At last, the mysterious stranger had a name. Emma thanked the owner with an easy smile before placing several framed photographs onto a display table near the front window. Curious visitors gradually gathered around to admire images of the town captured during every season of the year. Claire stepped closer, studying the collection carefully. Every photograph emphasized ordinary moments filled with warmth instead of dramatic landmarks. Children reading beside the river, friends laughing beneath autumn leaves, snow quietly covering the historic bridge, spring blossoms reflected across still water. Looking through Emma's work felt strangely similar to walking through the dreams that had accompanied Claire for so many months. While Claire quietly admired one particular photograph of the riverside at sunrise, Emma approached beside her without hesitation. "That one is my favorite," she said with a friendly smile. "Most people come here looking for famous views, but mornings like that remind me why I never wanted to leave this town." Claire turned toward her, momentarily forgetting every sentence she had rehearsed in her imagination. Instead of explaining impossible dreams, she simply answered honestly. "It feels familiar somehow, even though this is my first visit." Emma tilted her head slightly, studying Claire's thoughtful expression before nodding. Sometimes places have a way of welcoming people before they even realize they belong there. The words landed gently inside Claire's thoughts, echoing with surprising familiarity. They spoke for several more minutes about architecture, photography, historic buildings, and the annual festival. The conversation flowed naturally, without awkward pauses or forced introductions. Emma never appeared to recognize Claire, yet she treated her with the same quiet warmth that had filled every dream. When the bookstore owner interrupted to ask Emma for assistance arranging another display, she apologized with an encouraging smile. Before walking away, she reached into her camera bag and handed Claire a small brochure describing the town's photography exhibit opening the following afternoon. "If you're still in town tomorrow, I think you might enjoy it," Emma said. Claire accepted the invitation with sincere gratitude, watching Emma disappear among shelves lined with stories waiting to be discovered. As she looked down at the brochure resting in her hands, Claire realized that the mystery surrounding her dreams had not become smaller after finally meeting Emma. It had only become infinitely more real, and somewhere deep inside, she sensed that the most important chapter of the story had only just begun. Claire spent the night at a small bed and breakfast overlooking the river, but restful sleep never came. She expected the familiar dream to return, yet for the first time in months the mysterious riverside remained absent. Instead, she dreamed only of gentle morning light spilling across an empty bridge, while distant church bells echoed through the quiet town. When she opened her eyes at sunrise, the silence felt almost as meaningful as the dreams themselves. After breakfast, she walked slowly toward the community art center where Emma's photography exhibition would open later that morning. Along the way, every street corner seemed to awaken another memory from the dreams. The Blue Bookstore stood welcoming early visitors. The cafe owner arranged fresh flowers outside the entrance, and local volunteers decorated the sidewalks with colorful banners celebrating the festival's final day. Claire smiled as she realized she no longer felt like a visitor. Somehow, despite arriving only yesterday, the town already felt deeply familiar. Inside the exhibition hall, large photographs lined white gallery walls, each capturing simple moments that many people would have overlooked. Children reading beneath flowering trees, neighbors helping one another after a rainstorm, musicians performing beside the river at sunset, and elderly couples walking hand in hand across the historic stone bridge. Every image reflected patience, kindness, and the quiet beauty of ordinary life. Claire moved slowly from one photograph to another, noticing that several locations matched scenes she had experienced repeatedly while dreaming. She quietly wondered whether coincidence alone could truly explain so many similarities. Before she could linger on the thought, Emma approached with the same warm smile Claire had begun recognizing almost instinctively. She thanked Claire for accepting the invitation and offered to guide visitors through the exhibition before the official presentation began. As they walked together, Emma shared the stories behind several photographs, explaining that she believed every community carried countless remarkable stories hidden inside everyday routines. Claire listened with genuine admiration, appreciating how naturally Emma noticed details that most people hurried past without seeing. Their conversation flowed effortlessly from photography to architecture, from travel to childhood memories, and eventually to the importance of finding a place that truly felt like home. Emma admitted she had received opportunities to move to larger cities, but always found herself returning because the river, the people, and the quiet rhythm of the town reminded her what mattered most. Claire hesitated before confessing that she had never expected a weekend trip to leave such a powerful impression. Emma smiled thoughtfully and suggested taking a short walk after the exhibition closed. Late that afternoon, they followed the familiar riverside path beneath blooming cherry trees while golden sunlight reflected across calm water. The peaceful silence between them felt surprisingly comfortable, requiring no effort to fill with unnecessary conversation. They paused on the old stone bridge, where Claire had first seen Emma the previous day. Looking across the river, Emma quietly remarked that sometimes life introduced important people through the most ordinary circumstances. Claire looked toward the flowing water, wondering whether ordinary circumstances could truly explain everything she had experienced during the past 6 months. She chose not to mention the dreams, sensing that the time was not yet right. Instead, she simply smiled and thanked Emma for sharing her favorite places. As the sun slowly disappeared beyond the distant hills, Claire realized that what had begun as an impossible mystery was quietly becoming something even more meaningful. She no longer wanted answers merely to satisfy her curiosity. She wanted the chance to know the remarkable woman standing beside her, not because she had once appeared in countless dreams, but because every conversation in the real world made her hope there would be another tomorrow waiting just ahead. Claire extended her stay for one more day, telling herself that she simply wanted to enjoy the quiet charm of the riverside town before returning to Portland. Deep inside, however, she knew the real reason. Every conversation with Emma left her with a strange feeling that they had skipped the awkwardness of meeting for the first time and had somehow resumed a friendship that had merely been paused. Early the next morning, Emma invited Claire to accompany her on a photography walk before the streets filled with visitors. They wandered through peaceful neighborhoods where flowering vines climbed historic brick buildings, paused beside the old lighthouse museum overlooking the river, and watched fishermen preparing their boats beneath a sky painted with soft shades of gold and blue. Claire stopped walking the moment she saw the lighthouse. It matched the sketch from her dream with astonishing precision, from the weathered stone walls to the narrow staircase winding toward the lantern room. She quietly reached into her bag and removed the notebook she had carried everywhere for months. Without saying anything, she opened to the page containing the carefully drawn lighthouse and handed it to Emma. Emma studied the sketch with genuine curiosity before looking back toward the real building. "You drew this before you came here?" she asked. Claire nodded slowly, explaining that the drawing had appeared in a dream long before she even knew the town existed. Emma smiled politely, assuming it was simply an interesting coincidence, but Claire could no longer keep the rest of the truth hidden. Taking a steady breath, she admitted that the lighthouse was only one small part of a much larger mystery. She described recurring dreams that had visited her night after night for more than 6 months, dreams filled with the same riverside streets, the same bookstore, the same stone bridge, and always the same woman. She confessed that she had drawn dozens of sketches before finally traveling to the festival, never expecting the stranger from those dreams to exist in real life. Emma listened quietly without interrupting, her expression thoughtful rather than doubtful. Claire hesitated before opening another page of the notebook. It contained a detailed portrait she had completed weeks earlier. The resemblance was unmistakable. Emma stared at the drawing for several long moments before looking back at Claire with quiet disbelief. "You made this before we met?" she asked softly. Claire answered honestly that every page in the notebook had been dated as she completed it. Emma slowly turned through the remaining sketches, finding familiar places, familiar smiles, and moments that closely resembled places they had already visited together. Neither woman spoke while a gentle breeze carried the scent of spring flowers across the river. Finally, Emma closed the notebook carefully and returned it to Claire. "I do not know how to explain any of this," she admitted with a calm voice. "I have never seen you before this weekend, but for some reason none of this feels frightening. It only feels strangely familiar." Those words filled Claire with unexpected relief. She had feared disbelief or polite distance, yet Emma responded with curiosity instead of judgment. As they continued walking beside the quiet river, both women realized they were no longer trying to solve an impossible mystery. They were beginning to share it together, one honest conversation at a time, while somewhere beyond the questions that still remained unanswered, the first foundations of genuine trust quietly took root beneath the bright spring sky. After their conversation beside the lighthouse, Claire and Emma returned to town with a new understanding between them. The mystery surrounding the dreams remained unanswered, but neither woman felt pressured to find an explanation immediately. Instead, they discovered that simply sharing honest conversations created a connection far more meaningful than any answer they could uncover. Over the next several days, Claire explored more of the riverside town while Emma continued preparing photographs for her upcoming exhibition. Their time together became filled with ordinary moments that somehow felt unforgettable. They visited small cafes where local residents greeted Emma by name, walked through quiet streets lined with historic homes, and spent afternoons discussing everything from childhood memories to future dreams. Claire noticed that the woman from her dreams was not mysterious because of some impossible quality. Emma was remarkable because of the kindness, patience, and curiosity she showed in everyday life. One afternoon, while organizing photographs inside Emma's studio, Claire discovered that many of Emma's images carried the same emotional feeling as her dreams. The photographs were not identical to the scenes she had imagined, but they captured the same sense of peace and belonging. Emma explained that she had always been drawn to places where people felt connected, believing that every location held invisible stories waiting to be noticed. Claire smiled because those words sounded strangely familiar. They reminded her of the feelings she experienced whenever she woke from another dream. As the days passed, Emma became curious about Claire's life outside the town. Claire shared stories about her work as an architect, her carefully planned routines, and the pressure she often felt to appear successful even when something inside her felt incomplete. She admitted that before meeting Emma, she had spent years designing beautiful spaces for others while rarely asking herself what kind of life she truly wanted to build. Emma listened quietly before sharing that she understood the feeling. She had spent much of her life capturing other people's stories because she was sometimes afraid to create a new chapter of her own. Their conversation revealed an unexpected similarity. Both women had been searching for something meaningful long before they ever met. That evening, they sat near the river watching the sunset transform the water into shades of orange and gold. Claire finally asked Emma whether she believed some people could feel familiar before they truly knew each other. Emma considered the question carefully before answering. She said that sometimes a person's presence could feel comfortable because something about them reflected a part of ourselves we had been trying to understand. Claire looked toward the river, quietly thinking about how much those words explained. She still did not know why Emma had appeared in her dreams, but she no longer believed. The answer mattered as much as the connection growing between them in reality. Before leaving that night, Emma invited Claire to attend a local art gathering the following weekend. Claire accepted immediately, realizing that returning to Portland suddenly felt less urgent than before. As she walked back to her guest house beneath the soft glow of streetlights, she opened her notebook and looked at the first sketch she had ever made of Emma. For months, the drawing represented a question she desperately wanted answered. Now, for the first time, it represented the beginning of a story she wanted to experience one moment at a time. The local art gathering arrived beneath a clear afternoon sky, filling the Riverside district with music, conversation, and colorful displays from artists throughout the region. Claire arrived earlier than expected, partly because she was excited to see Emma's work and partly because she wanted to understand more about the world that had always felt strangely familiar. As she walked through the crowded streets, she noticed how naturally Emma connected with everyone around her. She greeted painters, spoke with children who admired her photographs, and remembered small details about people she had met years before. Claire realized that Emma was not simply someone who captured stories through a camera. She was someone who helped create the moments worth remembering. Inside the main exhibition hall, Emma displayed a new collection focused on the relationship between people and the places they called home. Each photograph showed ordinary scenes transformed by attention and care. A family sharing breakfast near a window. Friends laughing beside the river. A bookstore owner arranging shelves before opening. A quiet bridge beneath changing seasons. Claire stood in front of one photograph longer than the others. It showed the old stone bridge during a peaceful spring morning, almost identical to the place that appeared repeatedly in her dreams. When Emma noticed Claire looking at it, she approached with a gentle smile. She explained that she had taken the photograph nearly a year earlier after waking from an unusual dream of her own. Claire looked surprised, and Emma carefully continued. She admitted that before meeting Claire, she had occasionally dreamed about a woman she did not recognize. The dreams were never clear enough to reveal a face, but they always carried the same feeling of familiarity and comfort. She had never told anyone because it sounded impossible to explain. Claire listened quietly, realizing that for the first time the mystery was no longer hers alone. She asked Emma what the dreams meant to her. Emma smiled softly and said that perhaps dreams did not always predict the future. Sometimes they simply reflected emotions people had not yet understood. Those words stayed with Claire throughout the evening. She had spent months searching for a logical explanation, hoping to discover why Emma appeared in her sleep before they met. Yet standing beside Emma in the real world, She began to understand that the connection between them did not need to depend entirely on unanswered questions. After the exhibition ended, they walked along the river beneath strings of warm lights hanging between old buildings. The town had become quieter, allowing the sound of flowing water and distant music to fill the evening air. Claire finally admitted that meeting Emma had changed the way she viewed her own life. She had always believed every important decision required a clear plan, but now she wondered whether some of life's most meaningful moments arrived unexpectedly. Emma replied that she felt the same way. She had spent years documenting other people's journeys while avoiding her own uncertainty. Together they reached the familiar stone bridge, where Claire had first seen Emma in reality. They stopped there, looking at the river reflecting the lights above. Neither of them tried to define what was happening between them. Instead, they allowed the moment to exist naturally. For Claire, the woman from her dreams was no longer a mystery waiting to be solved. She was Emma, a real person with hopes, memories, and dreams of her own. And for the first time since the dreams began, Claire felt certain that whatever happened next would not be something she simply imagined while sleeping. It would be something they discovered together while fully awake. The days following the art gathering brought a new sense of balance to Claire's life. She remained in the riverside town longer than she originally planned, working remotely during the mornings and spending afternoons exploring the places that had once existed only inside her dreams. Yet the greatest discovery was not finding the locations from her visions. It was learning the small details that made Emma who she was. Claire discovered that Emma always carried an extra notebook because she believed important ideas could appear at unexpected moments. She learned that Emma preferred quiet cafes over crowded restaurants, loved old bookstores more than modern shopping centers, and often photographed simple moments because she believed ordinary happiness deserved to be remembered. In return, Emma became curious about Claire's carefully organized world. She admired Claire's ability to design spaces that brought comfort and purpose to people's lives, but she also noticed how often Claire placed her own needs behind professional responsibilities. One afternoon, while walking through a historic neighborhood, Emma asked Claire a question that stayed with her. "When was the last time you designed something only because it made you happy?" Claire paused because she did not immediately know the answer. For years, she had measured success through completed projects, professional recognition, and carefully planned goals. She had built impressive structures for others, yet she rarely created space for her own dreams. That evening, Claire opened her old sketchbook and looked through drawings she had made before becoming an architect. Many pages contained ideas that had nothing to do with buildings. They showed gardens, community spaces, small libraries, and places where people could gather together. She realized those forgotten sketches represented a part of herself she had ignored for too long. Emma encouraged her to explore those ideas again, not as a career decision but as a reminder of what originally inspired her. Meanwhile, Emma faced her own uncertainty. A major photography organization from a nearby city had contacted her about a possible year-long project documenting communities across the country. It was the kind of opportunity she had dreamed about for years, but now the decision felt complicated. She worried that leaving for such a long time might mean losing the connection she had only recently discovered with Claire. When Emma shared the news, Claire listened carefully before responding. Instead of asking her to stay, Claire reminded her that the person she admired most was the woman who followed her own curiosity and passion. Emma smiled because those words reflected the same encouragement she had given Claire from the beginning. They sat beside the river as evening settled over the town, discussing possibilities rather than fears. They both understood that meaningful relationships were not built by limiting each other's dreams. They were built by creating enough trust for both people to grow. Later that night, Claire returned to her guest house and opened the notebook that had started everything. She looked at the first drawing of Emma, then at the many pages created after their meeting. The earlier sketches represented a mystery she wanted to solve. The newer pages represented memories they had created together while awake. For the first time, Claire noticed the difference between searching for a person and truly knowing them. The dreams had brought them together, but their choices, conversations, and moments in real life were creating something far more valuable than any dream could have shown her. The decision about the photography project remained in Emma's thoughts throughout the following week. The opportunity represented everything she had worked toward for years, yet for the first time, she found herself considering more than professional achievement. She had always believed that new experiences came with excitement, but now she understood that meaningful connections could make difficult choices feel even more complicated. Claire noticed Emma becoming quieter and decided to spend the afternoon with her near the lighthouse where they had first shared the truth about their unusual dreams. They walked along the shoreline, watching waves gently move toward the sand while seabirds crossed the bright afternoon sky. Emma finally admitted that she was afraid of making the wrong decision. She worried that accepting the project would create distance between them before they had a chance to understand what their connection truly meant. Claire listened carefully before reminding Emma that the reason she admired her was because she followed her passion and noticed beauty everywhere she went. She explained that a person should never have to abandon their dreams to prove they cared about someone. Emma smiled softly, realizing that Claire's words came from genuine support rather than hidden disappointment. Later that day, Claire received news from her architecture firm in Portland. A major project she had spent months developing was moving forward, and her team needed her to return soon. The timing felt almost symbolic. Both women were standing at a point where their separate paths required attention. For the first time, they faced the possibility that the future they wanted might require patience rather than immediate certainty. That evening, they sat together beside the river, sharing memories from the short time they had known each other. Claire admitted that before arriving in town, she believed every important moment needed a logical explanation. She had searched for reasons behind the dreams because she thought understanding them would reveal the purpose of meeting Emma. Now she realized that perhaps the dreams had only opened a door. The relationship itself was something they created through every conversation and every choice afterward. Emma agreed, saying that the most meaningful parts of life were often not the moments people predicted, but the moments they chose to embrace. Before leaving for the night, Emma gave Claire a small photograph she had taken of the old stone bridge at sunrise. On the back, she wrote a simple message about remembering that distance did not erase connection. Claire placed the photograph carefully inside her notebook beside the original sketches from her dreams. The next morning, Claire prepared to return to Portland. Emma walked with her to the train station, and neither woman tried to make promises they could not guarantee. Instead, they promised to remain honest, continue talking, and allow their connection to grow naturally. As the train slowly moved away from the station, Claire watched Emma standing beneath the morning light, holding the same quiet smile that had appeared in her dreams for so long. For months, Claire had wondered why she kept dreaming about a woman she had never met. Now she understood that the mystery was never only about finding Emma. It was about discovering a part of herself that had been waiting to awaken. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, Claire felt excited about what the future might bring. 3 months passed after Claire returned to Portland, and life slowly found a new rhythm. The busy streets, familiar office buildings, and carefully planned schedules that once felt comforting now seemed different. Claire still enjoyed her work, but she approached each project with a new perspective. She no longer designed spaces only by measurements and practical needs. She thought more about the emotions a place could create and the memories people might build inside it. Every morning, she kept the photograph Emma had given her beside her desk, a quiet reminder of the connection that had changed her understanding of life. Emma had traveled to several communities for her photography project, documenting small towns, local traditions, and personal stories across the country. They spoke almost every evening, sharing ordinary moments that made the distance feel smaller. Claire listened as Emma described new places, while Emma asked about the buildings Claire was designing. Their conversations became a bridge between two different worlds, one built through architecture and the other through photography. Yet despite their constant communication, both women quietly wondered what would happen when time and distance continued to test their connection. One weekend, Claire returned to the riverside town for a short visit. She told herself she wanted to see the familiar streets again, but the truth was simpler. She missed Emma. As the train arrived, Claire looked through the window and recognized the same river, the same historic buildings, and the same peaceful atmosphere that had first drawn her there. Emma was waiting near the station, holding a camera and smiling warmly. Their reunion felt natural, almost as though no time had passed at all. They spent the day revisiting places that had become meaningful to them. They walked through the bookstore with blue-painted windows, enjoyed coffee near the river, and watched the sunset from the old stone bridge. Claire noticed something important. The town no longer felt special because it appeared in her dreams. It felt special because of the memories they had created while awake. That evening, Emma showed Claire a collection of photographs from her travels. Among them was a picture taken during a sunrise in another town. It showed two strangers helping each other arrange flowers for a local celebration. Emma explained that she had learned something during her journey. She used to believe her purpose was finding extraordinary moments, but she realized the most meaningful stories were often hidden inside simple acts of kindness and connection. Claire smiled because she understood exactly what Emma meant. The dreams had once seemed like a message from somewhere beyond her understanding. Now they felt like the beginning of a journey that led her toward a person who helped her see life differently. Later that night, they sat beside the river, talking about the future. Neither of them knew exactly where their paths would lead, but they no longer feared uncertainty. They had learned that strong connections were not created by perfect timing or predictable plans. They were created through trust, patience, and the willingness to choose each other even when life became complicated. As Claire looked at Emma beneath the soft glow of the evening lights, she remembered the first drawing she had made months before. The woman in that sketch had once represented a mystery. Now she represented a real person with dreams, hopes, and a place in Claire's life that felt more meaningful than any dream could have promised. The following months brought a comfortable balance into Claire and Emma's lives. They continued building their relationship across two different cities, learning that connection could grow even when life did not always follow a simple path. Claire became more confident in expressing her thoughts and emotions, while Emma discovered that sharing her journey with someone else did not mean losing her independence. They encouraged each other through new opportunities, personal challenges, and the small, everyday moments that often mattered the most. During one quiet evening conversation, Emma mentioned that her photography project would soon return to the riverside town for a final exhibition. The collection would feature images from her travels, but she wanted the closing display to focus on one place that had changed her perspective forever. Claire immediately knew she was talking about the town where they first met. When the exhibition opened, visitors filled the familiar streets once again. The bookstore with blue-painted windows displayed local stories, cafes welcomed travelers, and the river reflected the warm lights of the celebration. Emma's photographs captured the beauty of ordinary moments, but one image attracted the most attention. It showed the old stone bridge at sunrise, with soft light spreading across the river. Claire stood beside Emma as visitors admired the photograph, realizing how much had changed since the day she first saw that bridge in her dreams. After the exhibition ended, they walked together through the quiet streets. Emma admitted that she had spent months thinking about the strange connection between them. She no longer searched for a perfect explanation because she had learned that some experiences were meaningful because of what they inspired, not because they could be completely understood. Claire agreed. She remembered the nights when she had searched for answers, believing that discovering the reason behind the dreams would reveal the purpose of their meeting. Now she understood that the most important part was not why the dreams happened, but what they encouraged her to do afterward. They led her to take a chance, to explore a new place, and to open her heart to someone who changed her life. As they reached the river, Emma handed Claire a small envelope. Inside was a collection of photographs she had taken during their time together. Each image represented a memory they had created after meeting in reality. The first showed the bookstore where they spoke for the first time. The second captured the lighthouse where they shared their secret. The final photograph showed them standing together near the bridge, both smiling naturally beneath the morning light. On the back of the photograph, Emma had written a simple message about choosing the moments that become memories. Claire held the picture carefully and smiled, realizing that the notebook she once used to record impossible dreams had become something completely different. It was now filled with real experiences, conversations, and moments they had chosen together. As evening settled over the town, Claire and Emma watched the river quietly flowing beneath the bridge. They did not need promises about a perfect future. They only needed the understanding that whatever came next, they would continue creating their story one day at a time. The dreams that once brought them together had opened the door, but their choices had built everything that came after. 1 year later, the riverside town welcomed another spring filled with familiar sounds, gentle sunlight, and the quiet beauty that had once seemed like a distant dream to Claire. She stood near the old stone bridge holding a small notebook in her hands, the same notebook that had followed her through months of questions, sketches, and uncertainty. Yet the pages inside no longer contained drawings of a mysterious stranger she was trying to find. Instead, they held memories of a journey she had chosen to live. Photographs, handwritten notes, and small reminders of moments shared with Emma filled every page. Claire smiled as she remembered how different her life felt compared to the morning when she first woke up searching for answers. Back then, she believed the dreams were a puzzle waiting to be solved. Now, she understood they were simply the beginning of a story she had the opportunity to continue writing. Emma approached from the riverside path carrying her camera, just as she had countless times before. The years had brought new experiences, new photographs, and new adventures, but the warmth in her smile remained exactly the same. She joined Claire beside the bridge, and together they watched the river move peacefully beneath the morning sky. Emma had continued her photography work while also creating a permanent collection in the town, preserving stories from the people and places that had shaped her life. Claire had returned to architecture with a renewed purpose, designing spaces that encouraged connection and community. Their careers continued to grow separately, yet their lives remained deeply connected through mutual support and understanding. They often reflected on how unexpected their first meeting had been. A dream, a small town, a photograph, and a simple conversation had brought them together in a way neither of them could have predicted. But they both knew that the dreams alone were never enough. The relationship they built came from countless choices made afterward. It came from listening, supporting each other's hopes, and allowing each person to remain fully themselves. That afternoon, Claire and Emma visited the bookstore where they first spoke. The blue-painted windows had been restored, but the quiet atmosphere remained unchanged. The owner still remembered the day Claire walked in carrying a notebook filled with mysterious drawings. He laughed kindly when they told him that the stranger from those sketches had become the person standing beside her years later. As they walked back toward the river, Claire opened her notebook one final time. The first page contained the original drawing of Emma from before they met. She looked at it carefully, remembering how impossible everything had seemed. Then she turned to the final page, where she had written a simple sentence about choosing the present instead of searching for explanations about the past. Emma asked what she had written, and Claire smiled before sharing the words with her. They stood together beneath the blooming trees, surrounded by the same peaceful scenery that had appeared in those early dreams. The difference was that this moment was not something Claire would wake up from. It was real. It was chosen. It was a life they had created together. And as the sunlight reflected across the river, Claire finally understood that the greatest discoveries were not always hidden in mysterious places. Sometimes they were found when someone unexpected entered your life and showed you a version of yourself you never knew existed.